How our clinic works is we work out of the University of Western Ontario. We are third year and second year law students, and we work with first year law students and help bring them up through the program, help learn the ropes. Most of the student athletes who are part of the program have a big passion for sport, and so all of them are very happy to help contribute to this program, as well as us being the face of the program at the moment. Okay, so how the presentation is going to go today. I'm just going to do a brief introduction, and then Mike and James are going to talk about Sports Solution. Julie is going to talk about the SDRCC and their role as the tribunal responsible for dispute resolution for sport in Canada. And then we're going to do a case exercise where we're going to have some fabulous actors from the audience. Mike Smith, somewhere out there, and Tom Hall are going to come up, and they're going to help show you what the process looks like for dispute resolution, help you become a little more familiar with it. So I will leave that for the end. And then we'll start off with James. So James is a second-year student. He has a background in hockey, and that's how he found his way to the clinic. He played Division I down in Pittsburgh. Michael is a third-year student. He's been actively involved in the clinic for the last 2 years. He also has a hockey background. And Julie is with the SDRCC. So without further ado, James, are you going to start and tell us what kind of cases the Sports Solution deals with?
I think Meredith already sort of reviewed this part. Why is this not? Oh, sorry. Technically challenged here. Okay, so as far as what Sports Solution does, we respond to the needs of athletes on a full range of issues, ranging from selection to funding to discipline and a number of other things. Our primary, or probably the most frequent issue we assist athletes with is team selection. This summer alone, we've done 3 full internal and then full appeals to the SDRCC. So that's definitely the most common issue we deal with. But obviously, athlete reps out there know, and athletes, how important funding and carding is, so we can help you with that. And looking at athlete agreements is another big thing we do, and dealing with discipline and harassment issues as well. So just to briefly reiterate what Meredith said, we're 3 program managers. We oversee the clinic, and then there are 12 first-year caseworkers and 8 upper-year case managers. So the clinic as a whole is about 23. There's about 23 of us. So how can we help you? Again, we provide assistance and guidance in relation to any sport-related legal issues that you have. One of the biggest things we do, again, is support you through the dispute resolution process. So typically there are 3 sort of steps in the dispute resolution process. The first is resolution facilitation, the second is usually mediation, and then the last is full-blown arbitration. Throughout that process, what do we do? Well, we can do a number of things. We can work with you and your NSO and kind of be a conduit and be a third party that represents your voice to your NSO. We also do written submissions in appeals and oral advocacy should you go to the SDRCC or do an internal appeal. Preventative measures, we're big on these. Athlete reps, athlete agreements are obviously a huge link between the athlete and the NSO. So we always tell athletes and athlete reps, ask us any question you have. A lot of times issues arise because questions weren't asked at preliminary stages as opposed to later stages. So even if it's a one-line email, we can clarify that for you, and it'll ameliorate situations that end up being worse than they are. Again, athlete reps, publish selection criteria. Make sure you read it, obviously. Get someone else to read it, us. Look for subjective aspects. Again, this is difficult because depending on whether or not it's an individual sport or a team sport, there might be inherent subjective aspects, but again, we can help you, kind of guide you and, sit down with you and discuss what's right and wrong in a selection criteria. Also, another thing that athletes should be aware of, and athlete reps, is that we can't appeal the actual selection criteria. So once it's been established, we can't then go back and say, okay, well, we went on appeal this because we believe this selection criteria is just wrong. The selection criteria has already been enshrined in the Constitution. We can review it at a later stage, but at that point we can't actually help you. Selection disputes. Again, we usually hear from athletes after the fact, partly because the team has already been selected. Two common grounds for appeal are the basis for which subjective decisions were made or inappropriately applied selection criteria. Another tip, make sure, I know this is difficult for athletes because you don't always realize what the internal policies are, but we have to deal with appeals as soon as possible because usually when a selection has been, teams has been selected, there's a finite number of days past the selection date that you can actually appeal the decision. Moving forward, communicate with the NSO regarding policy. Make sure you gather the opinion of all of your athletes, or as many as you can. I know it's difficult for athlete reps to, sort of channel the collective voice of athletes, but you have to make sure you work as hard as you can to do that. And also learn from those around you. We think that whenever we see an issue arise in an NSO or a sport, we want to resolve the issue so it doesn't happen again at all. So learning from past situations so they don't arise again is definitely something we encourage as well. Mike?
Thank you. As Meredith mentioned, my name is Mike. I think I met most of you last year, but looking forward to meeting the rest of you sometime today or tomorrow. So a typical sports solution case, as James mentioned, we usually get initial contact is after a decision's been made, so whether it's a carding decision or team selection decision. Ideally, you guys recognize the problem as it's ongoing and we can handle the matter then, but sometimes athletes aren't always proactive, so it's always after the decision's been made. So what we'll do is we'll sit down with the athlete, we'll look at the criteria, we'll look at whether it's been established appropriately, we'll make sure that the NSO followed the established criteria and they applied it evenly across all athletes. If we think there's feet to the argument or there's grounds for appeal, we'll walk you through that process and explore different avenues, whether it's mediation, arbitration, and as James mentioned, we'll help you and support you the entire way, whether that's writing written submissions for you to the NSO or oral advocacy at the level of the NSO or to the SDRCC should we feel the need to appeal further. So how can you help yourself? Throughout any decision-making process, again, whether it's team selection or carding, keep records. So most likely that's email, so whether it's your email the criteria or change the criteria, or your coach or your trainer sent you an email what they expect from you for the upcoming season. Keep those in your records, keep a little folder in your email, then the more evidence we have, the better we can handle your situation down the road. When should you call? As James said, we don't have to rehash this, as soon as possible. As soon as an issue arises, do it during the selection process. If you think something's going wrong, do it then as opposed to waiting to see if you get selected. Obviously, it's a lot easier before the decision's been made. Contact details, and we have our business cards. We're by the lunch area all weekend, so come visit our desk. We have business cards and information sheets there. And basically, one of the top priorities why we're here this weekend is a common complaint that we get, or we have actually, is that we talk to athletes who've never heard of us. So as athlete reps, if you can do us a favor, go back to your respective sports and tell the athletes about our program and our services that are available to them. And I'll pass along to Julie from the SDRCC now.
Avant que je commence, j'étais supposée de faire ça avant. Si jamais il y a des questions en français ou s'il y a quelque chose que tu ne comprends pas à la fin, je peux vous aider. Je suis contente d'expliquer de quoi on parle après. So I was supposed to mention that at the beginning, but I forgot. So we are bilingual up here on the stage, which is good. First question, whose first forum is it? Raise your hands if this is your first forum. Excellent. Of those people with their hands raised, who knows what the SDRCC is? Huh. Good, so it's good that I'm here. All right. All right, so I'm just quickly going to go over who we are, what we do. I'm going to talk about who's in the world of sport ADR, ADR being alternative dispute resolution. There's probably more than you think. If you've never had to deal with disputes in sport, you may not know that there's a lot of resources there for you, and I'm just going to explain them a little bit. And as Meredith mentioned before, we're going to go through a little scenario at the end. So the SDRCC, that's the Sport Dispute Resolution Centre of Canada. We are a not-for-profit organization. We're 100% funded by Sport Canada, but we're not associated with Sport Canada. We deal with the prevention and resolution of sport disputes. I'll explain those two sides in a minute. We service at the national level, so that means Sport Canada funds us to be able to help you guys with your disputes. And the education side can go a little bit further. So we bring that down to grassroots level, get a lot of our messages out there. And we do have programs in place for provincial organizations and things like that. That's something we would discuss on a per case basis. We do work in both official languages. We have a board of 12 people. We're lucky we have 2 in the room tonight. Dasha and Mike Smith are on our board. So there are some of our athlete representatives on the board. We also have 46 roster members. Roster members are our mediators and arbitrators that help us with the resolution, and they're all across the country. So that's how we work. We're just a small office of 5. We've got a sort of a big network that works to help with these disputes. So from the dispute prevention side, I was told I need to stand up. I'm going to walk around a little bit. That's a little bit more my area. So I'm the Education and Communication Coordinator at the SDRCC. So my job is to come out here, meet you guys, create resources for you, help you in the areas of prevention, talk to you, let you know that we have publications and a resource center that you can look to when you have issues or just questions about team selection, carding, or an appeal that you're facing. We have a lot of different things that I'll show you here on carding, team selection. All of these things are at the kiosk with me, and if it's the first time here, I strongly suggest you come by and grab one of these. It's the rights and responsibilities, as long as a few other materials. Even if you're familiar with it, maybe some of your teammates aren't, and it's great resources for you to have. We have a website, of course, and on there, everything can be found in terms of resources as well. So if you don't want the paper versions, or if there's other things you're looking for, newsletters, there's articles, we link to other websites that may have resources. It's a great place for you to go. We also have a little mediation game, which will be fun, so you can go online there and try and be a mediator and see what would happen in that particular case. So it's kind of like a mystery book in that sense, where you get to choose what happens and work your way through it. It's pretty fun. All right, so for the resolution side, so I mentioned we have education and prevention, and then the other side is resolution. I think it's what most people know us for. That is our tribunal services. So Sports Solution mentioned before, there are different types of dispute resolution. RF is the first one. RF is similar to mediation. It's basically a facilitated conversation. So a lot of people may have an appeal or a dispute, and something might be going on. What RF does is it gets people talking, and you may hear or learn a little bit more of it when we go through the scenario, but sometimes people don't quite understand what the issue actually is, what's going on. RF is a great place where we can bring people together to talk, to understand what's going on. Mediation, I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with that, so it's about 2 parties or more coming together to try and solve something together. Arbitration is very much where there's someone there, an arbitrator, to make a decision. So the 2 sides present their case and a decision is made. And MedArb is a combination of the 2. So tribunal principles, why it's great that we exist, why it's really helpful for you guys. Well, 1, we're independent, so we're a neutral third party that's there to really make sure that what's fair and just is going to happen and with this appeal. Accessibility, we're low cost. Since we're funded by Sport Canada, it's relatively, practically free. There is a filing fee, but it's minimal, and sometimes it's even waived depending on the situation. Parties agreement, that's what we work for. So I did mention arbitration, but we like to strongly focus on the RF and the mediation. What we're looking is there's a lot of close relationships here. Sport's a small community. We're trying to get people to learn and to work together and try and get their problems resolved together. So that's what we really try and focus on when we can. Trial de novo, so it just means you can go there and you can present your case and you can bring all the facts and feel confident about it being treated fairly. And final and binding. That's another thing that's great, is that when, let's say you go through arbitration and an arbitrator decides on something, well, that's it. That's the final decision. That's what needs to go through, and that's what needs to happen. If they decided the selection was wrong or the carding was wrong, it's final and binding. Very quickly, I didn't mention the doping side. So half of what we do is doping related. So when an athlete is asserted a doping violation, they do come through the SDRCC if they want to contest that or they want to dispute or appeal the sanction. So you can see the numbers here. About half of the cases that we do are doping, and the other half are what we call ordinary. Ordinary being team selection, carding are top 2. We have things like discipline, contracts, and things like that. And as you can see, you guys are our biggest customers. About 76% of the people that come to us, or claimants that come to us, are athletes. We're not just an athlete-focused organization, however, we are for the sport community at large. So coaches, officials, organizations, anyone that has trouble can come see us. It just so happens that you guys are our top clients. All right, very quickly, what I want to explain is sometimes, and I even got this at the kiosk so far this weekend, is there's a little confusion between SCRCC, Sport Solution, and even there's another organization called Sport Law and Strategy Group. So they did a great job at explaining what they do. They're very athlete-focused. Again, they're not lawyers, not providing legal advice, but a lot of support and guidance and assistance when it comes to your issues. Sport Law and Strategy Group is a team of lawyers, or a group of lawyers. They generally work more with the NSOs. They often conduct a lot of the NSO internal appeals. So if you go through the internal appeal process, it will be this organization that might organize that. But you do have a great resource center. So if you were to find their website, you have a lot of materials on there that could be good for you. So you could check that out. And then finally, we're neutral independent. We can provide you some guidance or some direction where you need to go for information. If you're having a dispute, we're not lawyers either. We're not going to give you advice on what you should do, but we are that tribunal that will be able to handle that appeal should it happen. Any questions on that stuff? Yes.
I'm just curious about 76% of the claimants were athletes.
Yes.
Do you know how many, or is it an appropriate question to ask how many went in favor of the athletes?
It is an appropriate question. I don't have the answer for you though. What's tough with that as well is we do have, right now I think it's only about 40% settlement. So people could come to us for mediation or arbitration. What they have to do, let's say it's an arbitration, for example. We have a mandatory RF process, which means we're not going to let you go into there and just sort of fight this out and have someone make a decision. We want you to at least try, have a conversation first. And surprisingly, or what some people may think, surprisingly, people come out of that with a settlement. So they don't even get to arbitration. So I wouldn't get to give a appropriate number in that way because they've come to something where both parties agree. So there's a side where there's arbitration and in a way someone wins and someone loses. There's mediation and there's the settlements too from the RF, which is they work together so it benefits both people. No problem. Any other questions? Yep.
Do you represent athletes in general, like not just national team, or what's your scope?
Okay, so represent is not what we do, so we won't represent them. Yeah.
Represent's the wrong word.
Yeah.
Do you
Decide.
Support, provide services for. Yes, so again, we're funded by Sport Canada to provide these services at the national level, but we do have initiatives and things in place that will allow for provincial or club or other people to be involved. It's often a fee for service, depending on who's involved. As long as there's no MSO, NSO involved, then we go to sort of a fee for service structure that varies depending on the situation and case. Do I see someone waving? Okay. One more question, and then we're going to go to the scenario, and we'll leave room for more questions at the end. Dasha? Oh, I'm supposed to walk with the mic, aren't I? Sorry.
I can speak loudly. I feel like I should know this as a board member and as someone who just applied to Sports Solution. And I have an idea, but I think it's a general, sometimes point of confusion. But I'm wondering, because so many athlete issues are time sensitive, and because you guys say, bring them forward as quickly as possible, because things have to, the world of sport and competition doesn't wait. So I'm wondering if you can speak to anybody, actually, it doesn't have to be you, Julie, but just to what the best, or it may be too broad of a discussion to have right now, but maybe it's a good idea to have some kind of communication with this group so they can pass it on to their athletes, just sort of a likely case scenario and where the best first point is. So if you have something that's really urgent and needs a decision ASAP, when is the best time to go to Sports Solution? When is the best time to go directly to SCRCC? Or, because sometimes I know not all cases not all disputes go through Sports Solution. Some come directly to you, and some don't end up going to you guys at all. So, just sort of, you get what I'm saying.
It's a very good question. And we do work together, right? So people will call us, they'll have questions, and because we're not lawyers and we're not even providing guidance or assistance, we will direct people to Sports Solution. The best thing I can say is if you're hesitant, or if you've got a question, or if you're not sure, if you think maybe this was unjust or not fair, right away, ask one of us. We will make sure you get to the right person at the right time. So if we can't help you, if we're not at a point where we say, you should file an appeal, we're going to have you call and contact Sports Solution directly. You can also go directly to them as well. So just, if you have a question, don't wait. If someone tells you, you know what, you can't appeal that, there's no grounds for that, there's no basis, at least you ask the question, and a month later, a year later, you're not regretting that choice. So either of us, it's a good question, either of us can help you out, or at least direct you to who you need to talk to.
Julie, can I just add to that for 1 second? So most of the athlete agreements, they have the SDRCC as the second level of appeal. So there'll be an initial appeal within the NSO. So in that case, you would want to contact Sports Solution. We have to go through the internal appeal process before you can get to the SDRCC, except in the case where the team selection is, 3 days from now, the team's leaving. Sometimes you can bypass that internal process. But that's a good question for
So for smaller organizations that don't have the resources, or for really extremely time-sensitive situations, I think we had 4 Olympic team selection cases within 3 days before the Olympic deadline this last year. So in things like that, those internal appeal processes will be bypassed. But Meredith is right. Just, again, they're here for you. There's a large team, and you can ask them those questions.
And we had an Olympic team selection appeal that they lost it on the initial appeal at the NSO, and they were able to go to SDRCC and get the decision reversed within about 5 days before the deadline for team submissions. So.
And we can work faster than that.
They can work fast.
So. All right, so we're going to move on to the scenario to make sure we have time to do this. While I set it up, if I could ask Mike and Tom to join us on stage, please.
Okay.
All right. There we go.
Let's give them some love.
Hey, how are you?
First scripture.
Sweaty.
I know, yeah.
All right, so what we're going to do here, this is fun. So the idea of appeals and disputes and arbitration, it's not the most exciting topic, and I have to admit, I travel around and talk about it, and sometimes it can get a little dry. So what we're going to do here is we're going to bring people up. We're going to go through a scenario and a situation, so you guys can see, a little bit how it's going to happen. We're not sure how closely these guys will follow script, so it may not exactly be how it would be in real life. But it'll let you see how the parties work, what a particular situation might look like, and we can have a little fun and participation in the process. So, first thing I want to ask is, I need a sport. So these 2 guys are athletes. I need a sport. So water polo, give me some more. Synchro. I heard high jump. We'll take high jump.
I like high jump.
That's great. We're going to take that. So,
Julie.
So
Lower jump and lower jump, I think.
I'm just going to set up the scenario here. So what has happened is, should I stand in the middle? Am I not? I'm good. All right. Not normally on camera, but this is all right. So this is a situation where the NSO has changed their criteria midway through the season. Mike thinks he should have gotten the card. He didn't, and he appeals the decision internally. Should Mike win this appeal, Tom is affected. That means he loses his card. So how this worked is, under criteria A, before they made the change, Mike gets the card. Once the criteria changed, that went to Tom's favor, and he gets the card. So that's how that worked out. They had injuries, things happened, so that's how it worked out. Once they went to the internal appeal, so they went to Athletics Canada, the internal appeal panel upheld the decision to not nominate Mike. And Mike said, you know what? Not fair. I'm going to bring that to the SDRCC. So just quickly, I'm going to explain. We've got who we call our claimant, Mike here. James is helping him as Sports Solution representative. Meredith is acting as Athletics Canada. We've got Mike and Tom that are on the affected party side. So that is a little bit of setup right there. And I'm going to be your mediator for the day. All right. So what we're going to pretend now is we've gotten to the ICRCC, we filed the appeal, and we're going to talk about what's going to happen. So one thing first, now that you know the situation, what do you think? So we have RF, we have mediation, we have arbitration. What should happen given this situation? What do you think would be the best means of dispute resolution?
Arm wrestle between Mike and Jim.
Okay, I'm going to be more specific. So we've got 3 options. right? RF, mediation, arbitration. What do you think at the SCRCC, these guys, which arbitration? RF? Arbitration. Actually, what we're going to do here, and everyone's got a good point. A lot of people would think this could go straight to arbitration, given that it's a card we're talking about. But we're actually going to try mediation, and we're going to see what's going to happen in this case. So, let's go. All right. So, what I want now, guys, is we've got the situation, we've got the scenario set up. I understand what's happened. Mike, James, I want to understand what you're looking for here.
Is this on? Our position is that we don't negotiate with terrorists. But given the situation that we are in, I'll say this. I think that I should get the card. The criteria that was in place, I met the criteria, and then all of a sudden the organization changed it, and then he gets a card. That is completely unfair. I think they should just give me the card. That's what I deserve. That's what I need for my lifestyle.
Mike, you're right. I feel that due to the fact that at the internal level, the NSO has already decided that the new selection criteria will be applied, we might not be successful at the SCRCC level with that. Would you be interested in doing a jump off?
Well, I don't. Tom's a little taller than I am, and I don't know if I should do a jump off. The card's important for me. I mean, I work. I have a pretty good job, and I have really good sponsors. And to be quite frank, the services that are provided to me by virtue of having the card are phenomenal. I need that, and I want that. Plus, the province that I'm in, I get tax breaks for having that card, so that's what's really important.
Okay, thank you for that side. What I did hear is, you do deserve the card. What I also heard from James is there might be another option, which could be a jump off that you're not loving, but it is an option that's coming from that side. Athletics Canada, what do you think about that?
As the NSO in this situation, the internal appeal made it clear that we did establish the criteria and change the criteria in accordance to a fair and just situation. In terms of having a jump off, we don't have the money and resources for that. We think that you should just, there is a competition coming up in about a month, and we think that you guys can sort it out there. Whoever wins there, maybe they can be the party who gets the card. Like, that's the only thing we can do. We have a lot of cost constraints as the NSO, and we can't just be holding impromptu competitions whenever there's a disagreement.
Okay, your side has been heard. We're going to move on to the next. It being a mediation, everyone gets to talk. So we're going to ask Mike and Tom what they think should happen here.
The winning side. Well, I think the old guy over there who got injured halfway through the season because he's past his prime should just face the facts and realize that if he hadn't gotten hurt, he could have kept his card. But anyway, what else am I saying? I want to take part in this appeal. Yeah, I think I deserve that card.
Yeah, that's enough. So what I'm responding to now is the idea of having this jump off. I mean, my client's visibly upset. And basically, we went through an internal appeal process. As AthletesCAN said, we won. So I don't think we're going to like the jump off. I think Mr. Smith should listen to his counsel, Sports Solution Smart. It'd be wise to listen to them. Then there's a good chance you wouldn't win, and we won the internal appeal already. So I don't think we're down for a jump off, really. We're open to mediation, discussing other options, but at this point, we're not ready for a jump off.
I'm not ready to compete in a Masters competition at this point in my career.
Exactly.
So he said he's not ready to compete in a Masters competition. If you didn't hear his answer.
Not to mention, I know AthletesCAN said that there's a competition coming up, but then I would have to, in terms of my training, focus on the competition and then have to focus on the jump off as well, and that's not really feasible for me. It doesn't make sense. What makes sense is that let's just go back to the rule that was in place so I could get my card and move on with life.
Okay, excellent. So we're gonna stop here just for a second. We're going to stop here just for a second. So you've heard different positions, right? So you know the situation. You've heard jump off as a possibility. You heard wait and do the next meet. You heard just give me the card. You heard that type of stuff. Just, you can yell it out there. What do you think should happen right now? You think what, sorry?
To arbitration.
Okay, that's an option. Anyone else have anything, now that you've heard, if you were in my place maybe as a mediator, what you'd do?
I don't know all the rules, but are you allowed to split cards?
Very interesting idea. Anything else? Oh, pretty quiet. I thought we'd have some fun stuff. All right. So, give them both a card.
Talked about
We don't have money for that.
Talked about price.
Athletics Canada says no to that.
Talked
All right.
about price.
So now we've heard some of their positions, right? We know what they want as the outcome. But as a mediator, you might want to look and see, okay, look, but what is the real problem here? So have we really identified the issue? Is the issue just, give me the card, I want the card, you shouldn't get it? Is that it? So what I'm going to look here to the parties, I'm going to start with you, Mike. And you maybe touched on it a bit before, but if you could just, the only thing I want you to answer right now is what this card means to you and why you think you should have it.
Well, I'm really more concerned with the status of the card, because if I have the card, that means I got access to service. The money, I make money, I have pretty good sponsors. It's really just a service and tax breaks I would get from the cards that's really important for me.
I'm going to go to Tom here and see what he has to say, and why is it important to you?
I'm going to be serious now. I'm a full-time student, and in an astrophysics program on a full ride scholarship, but I'm broke, so I just need the cash to train and be a great athlete.
Okay, and for Athletics Canada, what do you think your issue is here with the two of them wanting what they want in this situation?
Our main issue is our constraints from Sport Canada. We only have the one card. They're both phenomenal athletes. We would love to card them both, and we want them both to continue in the sport. But in our opinion, our hands are tied. We only have one card. If they can come to some sort of an agreement on who gets the card, we are okay with that. But we can only assign the card and the benefits of the card to one person. What they do afterwards is up to the athletes.
Well, as Tom said, we don't care so much about the carding status, as Mike alluded to, which he wants. Like I said, he just needs the money, so I'm not sure if that's possible at all.
Because you have all the facilities already at your university.
At Stanford, yeah.
Yes, they have very nice facilities there. You don't need the physio credits.
No.
I think what it boils down to, and since we're in mediation, we'll speak openly, he really just wants the carding money.
Yes.
He obviously likes everything, but he realizes there's a risk of going to arbitration. We would probably take the money if that's possible at all.
So I think we've learned a lot right here in just asking that question. The first thing that we learned is Tom's a high jumper, astrophysicist at Stanford. But we also learned the different things that they want in this situation. So I'm actually going to do the wrap-up part here, and Meredith basically went into what it is that that would maybe happen in this situation, and somebody sort of alluded to it back there. In this situation, it's not exactly splitting a card, but what could definitely happen is a card would be assigned to Mike. Mike didn't need the money. Mike didn't need the money, right? He said, "Look, I just need access to some of these things. I don't need that. What I want is the physio. What I want is the training facilities. What I want is those services." Tom, what he needs as an astrophysicist at Stanford is the cash. So I'm not gonna go into that further. And what I want to stress here is this is why we did this and why we talked about this right now is just to show that mediation is a possibility in situations where a lot of people would maybe go to arbitration. This isn't going to happen all the time. I don't want you to walk away from here going, "Oh, we can split cards, awesome." I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying there are a lot of things that people will come to the SCRCC with or Sports Solution with, and they have a problem, but they don't quite understand what the issue is. And in narrowing down what the issue is, you may realize that in an RF or in mediation, you can have the discussion as long as people ask the right questions about what's actually wanted and how people can work together to get exactly what they need. So, let's say these guys continue training together. Well, they just worked on a solution together with Athletics Canada to try and get what they both needed. in this particular situation. So that was the most important part about this. So to answer, can you split cards? No, like one card is one card. And I'm not going to talk too much more to that, but there are situations in carding and in other, appeals where a conversation is going to lead you to a lot of different options. So that was a big focus of this right now. Question?
Yeah, I know you said you don't want to talk about it, but when you say you can't split cards, are you referring to that scenario or say giving an athlete 3 months or 4 months of cards?
I would say that would depend on the policy at the time. So in this situation, the policy was like this actual NSO's policy, so Athletics Canada only gives a full card. If the sport had divided cards within their policy, it would be able to do that.
Can everyone hear him? Okay, I will. People are hesitant to grab the mic.
And the second, this is really loud though. The second part of my question was, is it the NSOs that determine how many months is the minimum amount of months that can be awarded to an athlete?
For carding,
Yeah.
Minimum amount of months.
there might be a minimum. I've heard of cards that are 3 or 4 months is the minimum I've heard of. There might be lower. It depends on Sport Canada and the NSO's their determination. We can ask Bob Price about that, whether it's like a distinct policy, but yeah.
With a lot of those things, it's very specific to the sport, so it's going to be hard for us. We have a question here, and then I'll come over there afterwards.
I just have a comment to Tom that he would not win this in arbitration because he's going to a U.S. college, which is no longer allowed.
He would be eligible for 4 months of carding.
Yes.
And
that's all I needed.
This is the first what if that we got. We knew people could talk about tuition credits and things like that, but we were just.
I'd like to ask co-counsel to come to the table.
Question over here.
I'm just curious why in this I realize we shouldn't get caught up in this particular situation, but would the NSO ever be held accountable for changing those situations right in the middle of a performance year?
So yes, that is one aspect of it. But what we're considering here is they did change it, but they allowed for in their rules to make changes throughout it. So Mike's kind of contesting that it wasn't fair is part of what this appeal is. But we're bypassing that and saying, look, it's not cool, but their policies allowed for it, and that's not the issue being disputed right now. Their criteria. So normally it's something that you should definitely look for. If criteria has changed and you think it's at an unfair point or it affects you in a particular way and that shouldn't have happened, you should definitely raise it and bring it up, and it could possibly become an appeal. It's definitely a situation where that might happen. Here we were trying just to get to the basically negotiated agreement, so we didn't go quite as much into the details.
Yeah, and just to expand on that, that would be all dependent on the situation. So typically when we hear an NSO change their criteria midway through, red flag right away, they can't do that. I'm sure we could argue you got to abide by the first criteria. That said, in their initial criteria, they might have left room for should it be required later. We leave some space open to maybe adjust some things in the criteria. And then we'd have an argument what is required. Were they required to change that?
There's usually notification rules too, so it needs to be put on the website, or athletes need to be sent emails 3 months before the change comes into effect or whatever it is.
It'd have to be implemented correctly.
A lot of those things are in here.
It'd have to go through an executive committee, probably a team committee. So this is all fact dependent, whether it was established appropriately, but
good catch. That's
so yeah,
a really
so
good
we
question.
would probably both feel pretty comfortable going to arbitration, and that's what it'd be kind of like 50-50. It's an argument, depends on the facts, depends on the arbitrator you get, so which is great. This mediation kind of win-win at this point, which is when we have time granted, we always encourage our athletes to go through a mediation or resolution facilitation. Nobody lost here, and then if we went to arbitration, sometimes it's the flip of a coin, something like as close as this, and then one party would lose completely.
So you've got the 4 of us up here, kind of like 6 of us up here, for more questions on anything with regards to appeals or your rights and responsibilities when it comes to this stuff. Does anyone have any more questions?
Can I just make a point to, while people are thinking of Eric's question, because it's been sitting with me. So Eric's question was with respect to the 75 or 76% of claims that go through the SERCC, and the question was, do the athletes, can you give us the numbers in terms of, are the athletes more successful? But when you think about it, this is a really good example. Like, I'm the claimant, Tom's the respondent. We're both athletes, right? And if we had gone to arbitration, clearly there was going to be, Tom was going to lose it. But as the athlete, I would still come out as a winner. So that pie chart that you see, and more so to your question, when you say that the number of cases, the athletes come out on top, in most cases the athletes will come out on top because it's always, it's athletes and athletes, right? So.
True.
Sometimes it's just against the NSO. It depends when there's an affected party like that. So when there's an affected party, then that's definitely true. Yep, coming.
So as athlete reps, I'm just curious, when it comes to an arbitration or mediation situation, are we as athlete reps allowed to be involved or go with an athlete or be on a call as to act as an athlete rep, or just, we have that in drug testing that we're allowed to get somebody to come with us if we need it. Are we able to sort of say, I know this has happened with us, and we're involved in the national team committee to a point, and then all of a sudden it goes to SDRCC, and then it kind of disappears, and it comes back a few days later, and this is what's happened. Are we able to be a part of that? What are the rules?
Yeah, well, I can.
Well, I'll just start with the SDRCC part, and then you can go in afterwards. So at the SDRCC, anyone can have anyone sit with them. So if you, as an athlete, want your athlete rep to come with you or to be with you during that part of the process, all that has to happen is you have to give us their name so that we can involve them in it. So the athlete has to officially say, look, I want this person to sit in with me, act as my support or representative, and we definitely allow that. James, did you have to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, we always encourage athlete reps to be involved in a situation where there's a dispute, because ultimately the athlete rep is the voice between the NSO and the collective body of athletes. So if there's a dispute that's going on, especially in a team or an NSO, generally the other athletes want to know, because they want to know, what the decision will be. That said, Meredith brought up a good point. You want to elaborate on that, Meredith?
Oh, it's probably not. As the athlete rep, you're also on the board of directors of the NSO. So I don't know, there may be some sort of conflict with you potentially directly being against the NSO, because the NSO is technically the respondent in the appeal process. But
yeah, so again, that would be in a situation where you're not doing an arbitration, the mediation is, you could still act as one of the parties that's helping to resolve the issue, right? That's the great thing about mediation, is that it's a collective body of people working towards a decision, whereas an arbitration is party A versus party B, and the arbitrator, party C, decides who is right and who is wrong. So in a mediation setting, I would say get involved, and especially at a resolution facilitation set, which is even less formal, which is literally the parties just sitting down and talking. So
we have a slightly different view. Not to take away or detract from the comments, but I think it would really depend upon a case-by-case basis, because you imagine this, you're the athlete's rep, and really in large part your role is to facilitate whatever process, make sure that the athletes are aware of the process that's involved, and I don't know if you really want to be in that room, especially in an arbitration, because it could be perceived that you are for one side versus the other, and if you are still competing, you still have to go back and compete and train with that athlete or the members on the team. So I would think any athlete rep giving thought to maybe participating in that process, you really have to take a look at the situation and ask yourself, do I need to be here? And if the answer is no, then you probably would, I think, be wiser to maybe bow out or take a pass on it.
Do you see how I was sneaky and put the board member and lawyer on the stage with me? Question?
Just one further comment to that. In many cases, athlete reps are also on the board of their NSO, and you therefore have a responsibility as a board member to that NSO. And it's a situation I found myself in where you have a responsibility on both sides. You have a responsibility to the athlete, but you also have a responsibility as your position as a board member. And so, maybe there's a way you can balance those two, but maybe it's better to step out as a conflict of interest on both sides.
I'm just going to respond to that comment quickly, right into Mike here. This is beautiful. Vampire fiction. At CKC, it is a...
Stop, seriously, stop.
Thanks. At CKC, one of the things that is supposed to happen and doesn't happen perfectly for sure is the board is supposed to be informed of
sport, they don't reveal any information to me as an athlete's rep or even to the board. They just say, oh, we're in an appeal. Like they're not open about it. They don't come back to the board for any input. Like should there be any disclosure? Should they be able, as an athlete's rep, should they be disclosing to that athlete's rep or even coming to the athlete's rep for help? It's just like all of a sudden the athlete's rep is just they're the bad person, you know, or however you want to put it. It's us against them when really the athlete rep might even be a mediator, but there's just no conversation at all.
Are you talking about whether there's a legal requirement or whether it just should be the case?
Sorry, say that again.
Oh, are you asking if there's some sort of requirement of them
Yeah,
to...
is there a requirement? Like, do they, if I went to them and said, hey, can you disclose what the situation is, do they have to as the athlete's rep, or?
If you're a director of the organization?
Yeah, they should, as a director of the organization, it all depends on corporate governance, really, in terms of the actual organization's policies. But I would, Mike, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I haven't seen it in any organization where there's a specific requirement that they kind of open up and say, this is what's happening to the athletes rep specifically. And to me, it would seem it's one of those situations where it's really an opportunity for the athletes rep to foster a relationship so there is that openness. Like, from my perspective, you really shouldn't have to go and ask that question. If you are the athletes rep, your board or organization, I know in an ideal world, should be saying, hey, this is what's happening. Okay, we want to keep you informed, we want to keep you aware. So I would think it's incumbent upon the athletes rep to make sure that you have that relationship so the lines of communication are open. I have yet to see an organization say, no, you can't because there are confidentiality rules, because clearly they're not. Like, it's public, right? You can observe it and you can read the decisions on the SCRC website once it comes up, so.
And as a member of the board of directors, the CEO has an obligation to inform you of what's going on in the organization. And so they can't just say, no, we're not going to tell you about that. You have the same right as every other board member as a director of that organization. And so that's something that a lot of people a lot of times happens is people get bullied by their NSOs. Their NSOs make up rules and tell them they can't do this, they can't do that. And that's a good time to come to us and ask whether they can do that and help foster those relationships.
And on that note, I think it's really important. I think NSOs, some of them at least, and some people in the leadership role, especially if they put a lot of time and effort, hopefully, into their criteria, and sometimes they feel like an appeal is an attack. I feel that there's a very defensive posture taken by a lot of NSOs from what I've heard from people. And I think it's important to get the dialogue going at the board level that these are positive for our organization. This is how we solve problems and move forward and fix criteria and drill down towards what, the perfect criteria which is impossible, but everyone knows that. So I think it's going into it as a positive thing and not saying, hey, look at, you've messed this up 8 years in a row. Let's work on it, not you're an idiot, So I think that's important.
Second part of the question. I didn't work out today, so this is good.
So the second part is, and it's happened a few times in our sport and beach volleyball, or volleyball in general, is there'll be an appeal and the carding delivery gets held up for every single athlete in the sport. So there'll be an appeal with karting, which happened in the Olympic year, and athletes didn't get their cards for 8 months. And, you know. And
That was horrible.
Yeah, and these athletes are not even getting funded to travel. They don't have any money, and they're waiting because, and it creates huge tension within the organization. And the NSO already knows this, so they're trying to turn their, the one athlete's on the appeal against all the athletes against him, just to stop doing the appeal, basically. When he has the right to do the appeal, it shouldn't hold up all the other cards. But this happens a lot. Should that happen, or?
So normally with individual sports, they rank athletes like 1 to 30, and say the cards go 1 to 30. They'll hold back, say there's an appeal, they'll hold back number 30's card, and number 30 and 31 will be the affected party and the appellant, and so they'll give out the 29 other cards.
So
but in a team sport,
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So basically what happened in this situation was one of the athletes that was appealing had a senior card, and the other athletes that were behind him were, I guess, junior cards, and they were getting that card split up amongst like 4 or 5 of them. And it became an issue. And it's just like no one stepped in. And until things actually changed is when the athletes went to the media. And
why did the appeal take so long? Normally they're done in a month or
it was just misorganization, and it was just, Matt was a part of that process, so.
He's talking about what happened a couple years ago, but it's still happening this year, currently, right now. And
how long do athletes have to appeal? Do they have 3 weeks, 10 days? I heard someone had 2 days one time. I think Ryan, that was 48 hours to appeal. Oh, okay. He got that changed.
This year, Volleyball Canada changed the policy where after the selections are made, you have 3 days.
Okay.
Or maybe 1 week, one total week.
Yeah.
And it doesn't count weekends, and they release it on a Friday. So it takes up the weekend, so you can't really get on it until Monday. So really you have 4 days. And right now it's happening where there's 3 athletes, including myself, that are having months withheld. So if my beach partner loses his appeal, I get 5 more months of carding, and 2 other athletes or 3 other athletes get 3 or 4 more months of carding. But if he wins, he'll get his full card. And they did this whole process. It goes to the arbitrator, this, that, and we're already longer than like 50, 60% of appeals. But they've said they've made a policy to speed it up, and we're still waiting. And the season's pretty much over.
It's been 6 months.
Yeah. Well, the selections were released in January. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still in the internal process as well?
Christian, my beach partner, told me they're still waiting for VC's lawyer to get back to them, or
well, maybe we'll be at the table outside. Maybe come see us and we can go through the details.
Like, no, just put this aside for a second. Think about it. So, however the organizations are acting, they have to act in accordance with your rules. So that's where, as the athletes rep, when you're asking these questions, you should be looking, going, okay, what's the foundation? What gives them the authority to act in the way that they're acting? And so it's the rules and the procedures that you have in place. That's the first thing. To your original question, the only way, I haven't seen it where the card gets held up whenever there's an appeal for 1 or 2 athletes. I haven't seen that. And the only way I can conceive that occurring is if the decision that's being made with respect to that case is going to have an impact in terms of the cards are affected. So that may slow down or stop or suspend the process in the other cards. That's the only situation where I could really conceive it. Well, then that makes sense because you need that determination, right?
Shouldn't Sport Canada see that, if one athlete's appealing, that why should the funding of these other athletes be upheld for months and months while they're trying to compete?
Bob will speak for Sport Canada, but think about this, right? So Sport Canada is responsible for 50-some sports in terms of karting. They don't have the jurisdiction, the ability to say, well, let me back up. They will say, this is the criteria for your sport. These are the number of cards that are being allotted to you. Give us your criteria, or sorry, make sure you meet the criteria. Give us your list within this time frame so we can dole out the cards, right? And so they do it across the board for all the NSOs. They do not have the ability to drill deeper and say, not only will you meet the criteria and meet this deadline, but you have to do this, 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 and this. They're totally acting like outside of their scope, right? And in terms of, I'm sure Bob will support me on this, I don't think they have the resources, ability to do that given the number of sports that they're dealing with, right? So there's certain jurisdictional issues that have to be followed or maintained.
We have seen that in other sports, actually, just so you know, it's not volleyball unique. We have had cases at the SCRCC where other people were not getting their carding. I don't just mean one person. There was a large number of people that had that happen. I'm going to take one last question, and then we're going to have to wrap this up.
Just wondering if anyone curates the decisions at the SDRCC. Is there ever a list of the most meaningful cases that are published? Because I know I often go to the website and want to read through, and they're all pretty standard cases that are the most recent ones, but I'd love to have the chance to see the more, the ones where bigger issues are being considered.
I can answer that. Unfortunately, when you say the bigger cases or the things with interesting issues, everyone looks for different things. So we get requests sometimes from students or from people looking for jurisprudence to help support their cases, and they have a similar type of question, but they're looking for very different things. So it is hard for us to group them in that way, because even what might be more interesting or unique for me is going to be different for Mike, for example, who's got a lot of different experiences. What we do have, and you have to maybe ask us more directly for them, is case summaries. We haven't got a lot of them for the last 2 years, I think, posted only before that, but we do have them available. Case summaries are great because they're 8 slides. It's a PowerPoint. It really gives you what the situation is, what the positions are, the arbitrator's analysis, and the outcome, and then last thing is lessons learned. So those are really great things. If, unfortunately, you do have to sort of ask something more specific at the moment, and we can get those to you. So I use them when I'm doing workshops. So I go to some coaching workshops, and it's about selection policy and creating things that are fair. So I take a few of those summaries with me, and we hash them out. But they're not all, unfortunately, available yet. But if any of you have situations or you're curious about certain things, you can just fire an email, and we'll find you the right information.
Are SDRCC cases binding on each other? Are they precedential?
No. Mike can say more to that, but no, it's...
No. Yeah. There's a few documents on the Sport Law and Strategy group on their blog. They have a couple articles that are really good. They'll summarize like team selection and use cases in there to explain the premises.
The cases aren't binding, but they can definitely be persuasive, right? So you want to keep that in mind. Did you talk about pro bono?
No, I didn't.
And sometimes the NSOs in their internal appeals, they will follow the SDRCC quite strictly.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'd like to add to that. Actually, one of the appeals that we heard, advocated for an athlete or helped an athlete out with earlier this year, went to arbitration. It was a team selection, and it was odd because the same NSO, there was a similar appeal on the women's side and the men's side at the same time. The facts I won't get into it, but the facts of the women's appeal, it was decided about 3 or 4 days. We were on the men's side. It had been decided 3 or 4 days before ours was going to be decided, and in that case, there was a very clear decision that should have been made based on, there was a similar issue based on a certain criteria. However, our issue was similar, but it was the path to the athlete actually representing Canada was much clear-cut. There wasn't actually going to be an affected athlete, and even though it made total logical sense for the athlete to represent Canada, essentially the arbitrator said, well, 4 days ago we decided this, too bad. So it's not technically presidential, but they do, it can influence, especially within the same NSO, it can definitely influence the arbitrator's decision.
okay, so I'm going to have to wrap this up now, but just a couple final points. The Sports Solution team is here if you've got questions for them. This is all great discussion, and if you've got more questions that are particular to your sport, they can help you out. You can come see me as well.